Geralt of Rivia was once a member of the Wild Hunt. For multiple months, Geralt rode alongside them as they searched for Ciri leading up to the events of Witcher 3. Yet for some strange reason, Witcher 3 makes almost no mention of this. In fact, I would bet that many, maybe most of you, are pretty confused as to what I'm even talking about right now. Why would Geralt, of all people, join the Wild Hunt? So let's clear up the confusion, and to get straight to the point, there is a reason most people don't know about this, and that's because Geralt's time with the Hunt is a plot point that is very quietly set up through a series of hidden quest lines in The Witcher 2. And while it is a storyline that The Witcher 3 continues, you really need to know where to look, which is why I've spent these past weeks scrounging up every last detail on the topic, because it's a story you can only piece together by digging into every corner of all 3 games. The good news though is that even if you're extremely lost and confused right now, I think I can get you up to speed pretty quickly. That said, before we get into things, I do need to take just a moment to thank Opera GX for sponsoring this video. And it's a very fitting sponsor because Opera have just collaborated with CD Projekt Red to celebrate 10 years of The Witcher 3. If you don't know, Opera GX is a web browser, a very popular one. Popular because it's focused on putting you in control. And their new Witcher 3 edition does exactly that. Within Opera, you'll just need to head over to the GX store inside the browser, where you'll find hundreds upon hundreds of mix and matchable mods, including their new and official Witcher edition, which comes complete with an animated wallpaper, custom icons, custom music, even the keyboard and tab opening sounds are ripped straight from Witcher 3. It's one huge love letter to the best game of all time, and even when opening the browser, you're greeted with a customized Witcher 3 splash screen, and then the new Witcher Hub, where you'll find the best Witcher 3 mods, guides, and even a place to keep track of Witcher 4 news. Plus, with all that, I'm not even mentioning the featured videos, and my personal favorite part of the hub, the interactive Witcher 3 map you can explore during times where you might be feeling a little nostalgic for Velen, Novigrad, or even Skellige. Opera GX also has a very effective importing tool which allows you to move all of your bookmarks, history, and even Chrome extensions over to Opera with just a few clicks. If interested, use my link in the description to download Opera GX today, which helps out the channel a ton and leaves you with a cool new browser. Okay, so to get back to Geralt and his time with the Wild Hunt, we really should start at the beginning. As most of you know, in the first Witcher game, Geralt remembers nothing of his past. He shows up at Kaer Morhen severely wounded with no memories and no recollection of how he even got there. Although one thing he does soon recall is that a group called the Wild Hunt had been chasing him before he collapsed outside the Witcher's Keep. He's reminded of this when, by complete chance in a very easily missable side quest, he comes into contact with a specter, a ghostly projection of Eredin, the king of the Wild Hunt.
Remember me?
I do. You chased me, you and your ghastly hunting party.
I do still, though chase isn't the word.
From there though, The Witcher 1 doesn't really move the missing memories / Wild Hunt storyline forward much. Truth is, there are just other things going on in Witcher 1. But one thing Geralt does do is eventually encounter this projection of Eredin again, and that time, he fights it.
You want to fight me? So be it. Your flight from death ends here. Draw your sword.
I was afraid you'd suggest chess.
I say Geralt fights the Spectre, although truth be told, it's a choice you have to make. You don't have to fight Eredin in Witcher 1, you can leave him be, although that's hardly worth mentioning because once you get to Witcher 2, your choice is ignored. As far as Witcher 2 is concerned, Geralt did kill Eredin's Spectre. Speaking of the second game though, Witcher 2 is where things get more interesting when it comes to the hunt. In Witcher 2, Geralt is suddenly much more concerned about reversing his amnesia and figuring out what the connection between himself and the Wild Hunt is. These are answers that don't come easily, as Witcher 2 returns Geralt's memories to him only in little flashes here and there. But one of those first little flashes is what really ignites Geralt's obsession in figuring out what the Hunt's connection to him is. While out on a little adventure with Triss, Geralt suddenly remembers that before he was found at Kaer Morhen, so for reference this is pre-Witcher 1 but after the events of the books, he'd been spending time with Yennefer on a secluded isle, the Isle of Avalon, or the Isle of Avallac'h as The Witcher 2 mistakenly calls it. Geralt recalls though that while on this isle, the Wild Hunt suddenly appeared and abducted Yennefer, leaving Geralt with no choice but to pursue.
The Wraith Riders kidnapped Yen, and I pursued them.
What happened afterwards, Geralt still doesn't know, but this recollection makes him certain of one thing. If he can learn more about the Hunt, he'll also learn more about his past, and luckily, there are 3 completely optional leads you can track down. The first comes from Dandelion, who informs Geralt of the possible existence of some elven literature on the Hunt, and the second comes from Geralt's new acquaintance, Vernon Roach, who, if you don't remember, is the commander of a Temerian Special Forces unit. Roach tells Geralt that shortly before his reappearance at Kaer Morhen, Roach's unit started receiving reports of children going missing across the continent. Most of the parents would say nothing as to how their children disappeared, but one woman claimed it was the Wild Hunt who stole her son, and she'd apparently been told this by someone whose description you might recognize.
And she claimed she'd learned of this from an old man who was pursuing the cavalcade. He resembled a skeleton more than a man. White hair, 2 swords on his back.
With time, hours into the game later, this conversation with Roach eventually leads to Geralt remembering his chase for the hunt himself, although not in much detail. Only that he'd been on the hunt's trail of abductions, trying to reach Yennefer.
Since I've been following them, they've taken 23 individuals, all between the ages of 10 and 20. All except for Yennefer.
It's almost nothing to go on, which leaves Geralt with only 2 remaining leads. The ancient elven literature Dandelion had mentioned, and one last lead he/you can only catch wind of a bit later into the game, after several people have rejected Geralt's questions about the hunt because, in Witcher 2, most people think Geralt is crazy for even believing they exist. Eventually though, you can track down 2 helpful people, a Nilfgaardian mage named Cynthia and an apothecary named Myron, who both inform Geralt of a man named Morton Collis, a historian who devoted his entire life to researching the Wild Hunt. By the time of Witcher 2, this historian is long dead, but rumor has it his life's work is hidden somewhere in the area, and somewhere is the only thing you're told, which, by the way, that is the sort of thing I love in Witcher 2. You're just told in very, very, very optional conversations about a couple of things that you maybe could possibly track down to help you out, and that's all you get. From there, the game says screw you, go find everything yourself. You get 0 hints as to where these items could be, and in the case of the elven literature Dandelion tells you about, you have 1 momentary opportunity to pick it up, and if you miss the item, tough luck, that was your chance. Ultimately, for the purpose of this video though, how you find everything doesn't really matter that much. The life's work of the Wild Hunt historian can be found in a tomb inside one of several hundred unmarked graves you can search through, and the elven literature can be found inside the tent of a Nilfgaardian official, which you can optionally explore during one specific story mission. Truth be told, the elven literature doesn't really reveal much. It's just a poem that Geralt thinks is complete nonsense at first, and Dandelion eventually interprets as meaning that the Wild Hunt are from another world, and that their leader must be very cruel.
In any case, somebody commands them. They feed on unrestrained lust. Sounds like some tyrant.
Dandelion is right, of course, but this isn't new information, and it's only new to Geralt because he still doesn't have his memories, and either way, nothing he learns from the poem gets him any closer to understanding his connection to the hunt. However, the work of Morton Collis, the Wild Hunt historian, is a completely different story, as finding his notes ends up being a huge step forward for Geralt in terms of understanding his past. To actually read the notes in full, you'll need to bring them to either Cynthia, the Nilfgaardian sorceress, or that apothecary I mentioned. And both give Geralt more or less the same information, some of which is interesting but not specifically related to Geralt, like how the hunt only moves from north to south because they enter our world at the North Pole, and how their visits to the continent can be predicted by tracking the movement of a specific nebula in the sky. However, the major bombshell comes from Morton Collis's interviews with a number of people who had met the Wild Hunt directly. As it turned out, every single person who fit that description had one of 2 things happen to them.
Anyone who has come in contact with the Wild Hunt has experienced mental instability that either takes the form of insanity or amnesia.
This leads to Geralt being told that the Wild Hunt project a magnetic field that apparently severely disrupts brain function, leading to the loss of memories or, as mentioned, pure insanity. It's at this point that Geralt begins to understand why his memories are slowly returning to him, as he comes up with this theory.
If an encounter with the hunt and its magnetic field addles the mind, then a second encounter should reverse those effects.
Indeed, someone who lost their sanity or memory to the Wild Hunt could be healed upon meeting the cavalcade again. But that is pure speculation.
Except it's not pure speculation. Geralt realizes that his memories are slowly coming back to him because he had already encountered the hunt a second time.
I have amnesia, but for some time now memories have been coming back.
Do you recall when this began?
Right after I killed a certain specter, the king of the Wild Hunt.
He's of course talking about the end of Witcher 1 when he fought that specter of Eredin, and remember, at this point in Witcher 2, Geralt still has no idea that he was a rider of the Wild Hunt. He's getting close, and he knows that he feels a strong connection to them and that the hunt and his memory problems are linked, but that's where his knowledge ends. At least, that's where it ends until near the very conclusion of The Witcher 2, with an optional side quest called The Secrets of Loch Muin. This quest is only available in fairly specific circumstances, dependent on your early game choices, and even then this quest is only in the enhanced edition of the game. But to get to the point, just know that most of this quest has nothing to do with the topic of this video, so I'm gonna skip by it pretty quickly. Geralt is hired to escort a handful of people through a very dangerous, monster-filled sewer system, and part of that group he's escorting includes Cynthia, the Nilfgaardian mage who had already helped Geralt with information on the hunt earlier. She claims, though, that she knows a lot more than she'd let on about Geralt's past, and if he helps them with this unrelated mission through the sewers, she'll reveal everything.
I've read the intelligence reports. I know your past. There are things in there, important things you don't remember.
Flash forward a bit, Geralt gets her through the sewers with one other survivor, and thankfully she holds up her end of the deal.
You were a rider of the Wild Hunt. I read the reports.
Don't the Nilfgaardians have anything better to do than write reports about witchers?
Not about witchers. About you. You are the sole person to have been a member of the host, and survived.
From here, Geralt learns that those reports had spread and caught the interest of many very powerful people. People who are now looking for Geralt.
You haven't the faintest notion how many people are interested in you. Very important people.
Just because I survived?
You're a former rider of the hunt, and you live. You may be the key to solving the mystery of the retinue, and they all know that. You must watch out for yourself.
You might be thinking, wow, what an interesting story setup. Surely this bombshell revelation that Geralt was a member of the Wild Hunt and that countless powerful people are tracking his every move because of it, surely that's a major plot point in the next game, right? I mean, you can't just forget about something like that, right? Well, Witcher 3 doesn't exactly forget about it, but we'll get there. There's one last bit of Witcher 2 content to mention first, though, which is the final Geralt memory return, the one that brings everything together. During the final minutes of Witcher 2, which, depending on your choices, ends up being a very long conversation with fellow Witcher Letho, Geralt finally recovers all of his memories, including how he saved Yennefer. Long story short, while he was on the path solo, he ran into Letho and saved his life. In thanks, Letho and a small group of other Viper School Witchers agreed to join Geralt on the path, and eventually they caught up with the Hunt. The fight between the Hunt and the Viper School Witchers plus Geralt ended in a stalemate, and a deal was made between Geralt and Eredin. Geralt for the return of Yennefer. This exchange was then made, Eredin agreed immediately, and at that point Geralt began riding with the Hunt, not as a captive but as a member, and Yennefer was handed over to Letho and the other Viper School Witchers. That is what Witcher 2 leaves you with, still with the major questions of, what did Geralt even do while he was in the Hunt, and maybe more importantly, how did he escape them and how did he end up battered and bruised outside Kaer Morhen? Two of those three questions Witcher 3 does answer, the other one, well, let's talk about it. Although before we do, I did just want to say that if you've been enjoying this video, if you want more Witcher lore videos like it, consider leaving a like and letting me know in the comments. I kind of live and breathe for doing Witcher lore stuff, but I always wonder if there's enough of an appetite for it compared to the other videos I post. Anyway, you've probably picked up on this by now, but, well, The Witcher 3 really struggles to deal with Geralt being a Wild Hunt rider. It's clear by the time CDPR settled on a final draft of The Witcher 3 that they decided that it needed to be a game newcomers wouldn't find too confusing, and that's why the final version of Witcher 3 only references Geralt's time in the Wild Hunt in very minor ways. It does clear up how Geralt escaped and how he arrived at Kaer Morhen in a couple of conversations, but what it doesn't do is answer what he was doing while he rode with the Hunt. In fact, there's only a couple of lines in the entire game where Geralt brings up his time as a rider. Most prominently, he mentions it during the Battle of Kaer Morhen, when he spots Imlerith for the first time.
See the commander? Name's Imlerith. I remember him from back when I rode with the Hunt.
Outside of that line, the biggest mentions you get are during two conversations that explain how Geralt escaped the Hunt. The first conversation is with Yennefer, just after she explains how her memories returned. After she was handed over to Letho, Emperor Emhyr had her found, and his men sped up the process.
Once the Emperor's mages got their hands on me, my memory quickly returned.
Geralt then goes on to explain, in this same conversation, that even though all of his other memories returned, the one thing he still doesn't recall is how he eventually escaped Eredin and the rest of the Hunt.
There are times I remember rushing forward, Red Riders around me. Next thing I know, I'm in the woods at the foot of Kaer Morhen. That's it.
Yennefer then explains to Geralt, who still hadn't figured out why Eredin wanted her as a prisoner and him as a rider, that they were being used as bait. Bait for Ciri.
Eredin believed Ciri would come for us sooner or later and he would capture her. Fortunately, she didn't fall for it.
Now, if you hadn't guessed this already, Yennefer is very wrong in what she's saying. Ciri did take the bait. She just didn't take the bait when they had Yennefer because she knew Geralt was already trying to rescue her. This is something that is explained near the very end of Witcher 3, during the quest with Avallac'h, where he and Geralt travel from world to world. One of the final worlds they visit is the location where Geralt killed the Spectre of Eredin in the first game, and as Avallac'h reveals, this is also where Ciri fought the Wild Hunt for Geralt's freedom.
Ciri came for you. She sensed you were in danger, tore you from the Hunt's grasp, then deposited you in the woods near Kaer Morhen.
Unfortunately, that is all The Witcher 3 gives you. After this, you'd expect interesting follow-up conversations with Ciri and Yennefer and other characters, but, well, you don't get that. I've said this before, but I think one of the most interesting concepts for a smaller-scale Witcher game would be one bridging the gap between the end of the books and the beginning of Witcher 1. Show us Yennefer's abduction, let us play as Geralt on the path as he takes on contracts and follows the trail of the Wild Hunt across the continent, where he meets Letho and the other Viper School Witchers and then travels on the path with them. You could include the battle between the Hunt and the Witchers for Yennefer's freedom, and then finally show us what happened to Geralt after he gave himself up for her. It's a story that, in my opinion, is begging to be told, and hopefully, we'll see it someday. Anyway, that is all for me today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like, and if you'd like to see more content from me, Witcher, Kingdom Come Deliverance, medieval-ish games, that's sort of my thing, feel free to subscribe. Thank you so much to my patrons, as always, thanks to you for watching, and that's all. See ya.